He fired me in front of everyone. The new CEO stood there with that smirk on his face, the entire office watching, and said I was a bottleneck. People laughed. Actually, laughed. They had no idea who I really was, no idea what I'd built, no idea that in about 90 seconds, their perfect new boss was about to have his entire world collapse. But I knew, and I waited for it with a smile. Before we dive into this story, if you love hearing about people who underestimate the wrong person and pay the price, hit that subscribe button and drop a like. This is a long one, and trust me, you're going to want to hear every single second of how this played out. Now, let's get into it. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling glass windows. I remember that detail because I kept staring at them while he talked, watching the city lights blink in the distance like they were mocking me too. It was 4:47 p.m. on a Thursday, the kind of late afternoon where everyone's tired, where people just want to go home, check out, stop pretending to care. Except today, they were all very awake, very alert, because there was blood in the water, and I was it. The new director, let's call him Marcus because that was his name, Marcus Chen, stood at the head of the table with his arms crossed, wearing one of those tailored suits that probably cost more than most people's rent. Navy blue, crisp white shirt, no tie because he was modern like that, approachable. His hair was perfect. His watch was perfect. Even the way he leaned against the table screamed confidence, control, power. He looked like he'd stepped out of a LinkedIn ad about success. And he was smiling. Not a friendly smile, the kind of smile a cat gives a mouse right before it pounces. "I want to thank everyone for being here," he started, his voice smooth, practiced. "I know it's late in the day, but I thought it was important we all hear this together. Transparency, right? That's what we're building here." He looked around the room, making eye contact with people, nodding like he was their buddy, their leader. Some people nodded back. A few even smiled. I sat near the middle of the table, hands folded in my lap, silent. I already knew what was coming. I'd heard whispers, seen the signs, but I didn't run. I didn't make a scene. I just sat there, calm, waiting. "So," Marcus continued, turning his gaze toward me. The room went still. "I want to talk about structure, about efficiency, about how we move forward as a company." He paused, let the words hang there. "We've been doing some evaluations, looking at workflows, leadership styles, where we're losing momentum." Another pause. His eyes locked on mine. "And it's become clear that some of our legacy processes, legacy leadership, aren't aligned with where we need to go." Legacy. There was that word. The same word I'd seen in his email to the board 3 weeks ago. The email I wasn't supposed to see. The one where he called me a relic, a roadblock, someone who served her purpose but is now in the way of innovation. I didn't blink, didn't move, just watched him perform. "You've done some nice work," he said, looking right at me now, his voice loud enough that every single person in that room could hear. "Really, some nice work. But the truth is, you've become a bottleneck. We need to move faster, think bigger. And unfortunately, that means making some tough calls." He tilted his head, fake sympathy dripping from every word. "Effective immediately, we're going to be transitioning you out. We'll handle the details privately, but I wanted to be upfront with the team. No surprises." For a second, nobody moved. Then someone coughed. Another person shifted in their chair. And then from the back of the room, someone laughed, just a short, nervous chuckle like they weren't sure if it was okay but couldn't help themselves. That opened the floodgates. A few more people snickered, that uncomfortable kind of laughter people do when they're scared and relieved at the same time. Relieved it's not them, scared they might be next. It rippled through the room, and Marcus just stood there, soaking it in, that smirk still on his face. I didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't stand up and scream or throw my notebook at his head, even though part of me wanted to. I just sat there, looking at him, memorizing everything. The angle of his smirk, the people who laughed, the ones who looked away, the ones who met my eyes for a split second and then dropped their gaze like they were ashamed. I took it all in, filed it away, because I knew something they didn't. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. And then, from the back of the room, near the door, a voice cut through the air like a knife. Deep, calm, deadly. "Do you even know who she is?" The laughter stopped. Just like that. Cut off mid-breath. Every head turned. I turned too, even though I already knew who it was. Standing in the doorway, arms crossed, face unreadable, was the founder. The man whose name was literally on the building. Richard Kwan. The ghost. The legend. The guy who barely ever showed up anymore because he'd been dealing with health issues, board drama, all kinds of behind-the-scenes chaos. But he was here now, and the look on his face could have frozen hell over. Marcus's smirk faltered, just for a second, but I saw it, the crack in the mask. "Richard," he said, forcing a smile, trying to recover, "I didn't realize you were—" "Answer the question." Richard's voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. "Do you know who she is?" Marcus blinked, looked at me, looked back at Richard. "Of course. She's been with the company for a long time, valuable contributor. But like I said, we're restructuring and she built this company." Richard stepped into the room, slow, deliberate. Every step echoed. From nothing, when it was just me and two other people in a basement with no funding, no investors, no safety net, she was there. Second hire, first believer. She didn't just work here. She built every system you're using right now, every process you take credit for in board meetings, every partnership that keeps the lights on. He stopped right next to Marcus, looked him dead in the eye. "And you just tried to fire her." The silence was suffocating. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. This was a strategic decision. The board and I discussed—" "Show them," Richard said, turning to me. I reached into my bag, pulled out a folder. Plain manila, nothing fancy, but inside was everything. Weeks of work, months, really. Every lie Marcus had told, every report he'd falsified, every credit he'd tried to hide. I had been collecting it all, piece by piece, quietly, carefully, because I knew this day was coming. I just didn't know it would be this public, this perfect. I stood up, walked to the head of the table, and handed the folder to Richard. He opened it, read the first page. His jaw tightened. He flipped to the second page, the third. Then he tossed the folder onto the table, right in front of Marcus, and said the words I'd been dreaming of for weeks. "Effective immediately, you're terminated." The room exploded, not with laughter this time, with gasps, whispers, shock. Marcus's face went white. Actually, white. His mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. Then, finally, he stammered, You can't. You can't do this. The board approved me. You need me. I've been running this company." "You've been running it into the ground," Richard said coldly. "And the board will hear all about it. Security's on their way. I suggest you leave quietly." Marcus looked around the room, desperate, looking for allies, for someone to back him up. But every single person who'd laughed at me 5 minutes ago was now staring at their laptops, their phones, the table, anywhere but at him. Nobody said a word. Nobody moved. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. Marcus looked at them, looked at Richard, looked at me. For just a second, our eyes met, and I saw it. The realization. The understanding that he'd miscalculated. Badly. He thought I was weak, thought I was finished, thought I'd just go quietly. He was wrong. "This isn't over," he said, his voice shaking, trying to salvage some dignity. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. Richard did it for me. Yes, it is. The guards escorted him out. The glass doors closed behind him with a soft click, and just like that, he was gone. The room stayed silent for a long moment, then slowly people started packing up, leaving, whispering to each other. A few glanced at me, but nobody said anything. What could they say? Richard walked over to me, his expression softer now. You okay? Yeah, I'm okay. You knew this was coming. I did. He smiled, just a little. You let him hang himself. I just gave him the rope. He put a hand on my shoulder, squeezed once, then walked out. And I stood there, alone in that glass-walled room, the city lights blinking outside, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. But this story doesn't start here. It starts 6 years earlier, when I first walked into a basement office that smelled like coffee and ambition, and met a man with a dream and no money to make it happen. It starts when I was young, hungry, and stupid enough to believe in something. Let me take you back. 6 years earlier, I was 28 years old and completely broke. I'm talking ramen for dinner, checking my bank account before buying coffee broke. I just quit my job at a big tech company because I was tired of being a number, tired of building someone else's dream while my own ideas got buried in endless meetings and corporate red tape. I wanted to build something that mattered. I just didn't know what yet. Then I saw the job posting. It wasn't even on a real job site. It was on a coffee shop bulletin board, printed on plain white paper, half covered by someone's guitar lessons flyer. Small startup seeking someone who wants to build the future. No experience required, just passion and guts. Email Richard. There was a Gmail address at the bottom. That was it. No company name, no salary range, no benefits package. Most people would have walked right past it. I took a picture and sent an email that night. Richard responded in 10 minutes. Just 3 words. When can you start? We met the next day at a diner that smelled like grease and old coffee. He was older than I expected, maybe late 40s, with gray hair and tired eyes that looked like they'd seen too many failed dreams. But when he started talking, those eyes lit up. He told me about his vision, a platform that would connect small businesses with resources they couldn't afford on their own. Shared services, shared tools, shared knowledge. He said it could change everything for people who were struggling, people who had ideas but no money to make them real. He talked for 40 minutes straight, barely touching his coffee, and I just sat there, listening, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, hope. When he finally stopped, he looked at me and said, "So what do you think?" I said, "When do we start?" He laughed. It was a good laugh, genuine, relieved. "How about tomorrow? Fair warning, I can't pay you much. Actually, I can't pay you anything for the first 3 months. After that, maybe minimum wage if we get some funding. No guarantees." I should have walked away. Any sane person would have, but I didn't. I said yes, and the next day I showed up at the address he'd given me. It was a basement, literally someone's basement. Richard had rented it from a friend for $200 a month. There were 2 folding tables, 4 chairs that didn't match, 1 whiteboard with a cracked corner, and a coffee maker that looked older than me. The Wi-Fi was stolen from the coffee shop upstairs. Our bathroom was a gas station 2 blocks away. It was perfect. The early days were crazy. There were 3 of us at first. Me, Richard, and a guy named Tom who handled the technical stuff. We worked 16-hour days, sometimes more. We lived on pizza, energy drinks, and pure stubbornness. Richard would sketch ideas on the whiteboard, I'd figure out how to make them real, and Tom would code until his eyes went red. We didn't have a business plan. We didn't have investors. We barely had a product. But we had something that mattered more than all of that. We believed. I remember the first client we landed, a small bakery owner named Maria, who was struggling to compete with the big chains. She needed accounting software, inventory management, marketing help, but couldn't afford any of it. We built her a custom package for $50 a month. $50! We probably lost money on the deal, but when she called us crying because she just had her best month in 3 years, it didn't matter. That's when I knew we had something real. Over the next 2 years, we grew. Slowly at first, then faster. I built every system from scratch. The intake process, the partner network, the pricing structure, the team culture. When we hired our first employees, I trained them. When we had our first crisis, a partner backing out of a major deal, I fixed it. When Richard got sick the first time, just a scare, nothing serious, but enough to shake him, I held everything together. I became the backbone. Not because I wanted power or recognition, but because I loved what we were building. This wasn't just a job, it was a mission. By year 4, we had 60 employees, 3 office floors, and investors circling like sharks. Richard's health was getting worse. He didn't talk about it much, but I could see it. The way he'd get tired in meetings, the doctor's appointments he'd try to hide, the days he'd work from home because he just couldn't make it in. The board started pressuring him to step back, to bring in professional management, someone with experience scaling companies. Richard fought them. He told them he already had a leadership team. He meant me. But the board didn't see it that way. They saw a founder who was sick and a company that was growing too fast. They wanted someone with a name, a track record, someone who looked good in press releases. That's when Marcus showed up. The board introduced him as a consultant at first. Just someone to help with the transition to our next phase, they said. Someone to take some pressure off Richard. I met him on a Tuesday morning. He walked into the office wearing a suit that probably cost $3,000, carrying a leather bag that screamed expensive, and smiled like he owned the place already. "You must be the famous backbone," he said, extending his hand. "Richard's told me so much about you." I shook his hand. It was firm, confident, slightly too long. "Just doing my job," I said. "Well, from what I hear, you do it better than anyone." He smiled wider. "I'm looking forward to learning from you." Learning from me. That's what he said. And for the first few weeks, that's what it looked like. He'd sit in on my meetings, take notes, ask questions. He was charming, attentive, always saying the right thing. The team liked him. Richard trusted him. Even I thought maybe this could work. Maybe having someone to share the load wouldn't be so bad. Then the small things started. He'd repeat something I'd said in a meeting, but phrase it slightly differently, and people would nod like it was brilliant. He'd take my reports and polish them before sending them to the board, adding his name at the top. He started scheduling meetings without telling me, then apologizing like it was an honest mistake. "Oh, I thought you were busy, didn't want to overload you." At first, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. He was new, still learning the culture, but then it got worse. I'd walk into investor calls and hear him presenting my strategies, my numbers, my ideas, word for word like they were his. When I'd bring it up privately, he'd act confused. "We're a team, right? I thought we were collaborating. I didn't mean to take credit. Let me make sure everyone knows you were involved." But he never did. The credit kept flowing to him, and I kept fading into the background. The team started changing too. People I'd hired, people I'd mentored, started going to Marcus instead of me. Not because they didn't respect me, but because he was positioning himself as the decision maker. He'd tell them, "Run it by me first, then we'll loop her in if needed." Meetings I'd always been part of suddenly happened without me. "You deserve a break," Marcus would say. "You've been carrying this company for years. Let me handle this one." It sounded like kindness. It was erasure. I started having trouble sleeping. I'd lie awake at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations, wondering if I was being paranoid. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I was tired and seeing things that weren't there. But then I'd go into work and see Marcus in my seat at the conference table, leading my team through a strategy I'd written, and I'd know I wasn't imagining it. I tried talking to Richard, but he was dealing with his own stuff. More doctor visits, more treatments. The board was putting pressure on him to step down completely, and he was fighting to stay relevant in the company he'd built. The last thing he needed was me complaining about Marcus. So I stayed quiet. I worked harder, thinking if I just proved my value, if I just kept delivering, everything would balance out. I was wrong. The breaking point came 5 months after Marcus arrived. I was working late,
like always, finishing a proposal for a major partnership that could double our revenue. It was nearly midnight when I decided to check my email one last time before heading home. That's when I saw it. An email thread I wasn't supposed to be on. Someone had accidentally hit reply all instead of just replying to Marcus and the board members. The subject line was, "Leadership Restructure, Confidential." My stomach dropped. I opened it. The email chain went back weeks. Marcus had been talking to the board about phasing out what he called legacy leadership. He never used my name directly, but it was obvious who he meant. He wrote things like, "She's been great for getting us here, but we need fresh thinking for the next phase. Someone who understands modern scaling. The IPO is going to require a different image." Another board member responded, "What do you suggest?" Marcus replied, "Gradual transition. Shift her responsibilities, bring in new people, then offer a generous exit package before we go public. Make it look like a natural evolution." I read it 3 times. Then I just sat there, staring at my screen, feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath me. They were planning to get rid of me, the person who'd built this place from nothing, who'd worked for free, who'd sacrificed relationships, health, sleep, everything for this company. And they were going to package it as a generous exit. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but the tears wouldn't come. I just felt cold, empty, like I'd been gutted. I printed the email, saved it in 3 different places. Then I went home, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat in the dark for hours. That's when something shifted inside me. The hurt started turning into something else, something harder, colder. If they wanted me gone, fine, but I wasn't going to just disappear quietly. I wasn't going to let Marcus rewrite history and pretend he built what I created. I wasn't going to let him win. The next morning, I went into work early. I started digging. If Marcus was going to erase me, I needed to know everything about him, every deal he was making, every report he was filing, every conversation he was having. I started keeping copies of everything. His emails, when I could access them, his reports to the board, meeting notes, financial documents. I started talking to people, quietly, carefully, asking questions that seemed innocent but gave me pieces of the puzzle. And what I found made my blood run cold. Marcus wasn't just taking credit for my work. He was lying to the board, falsifying performance metrics to make himself look better, hiding problems that could hurt us later, making deals with vendors who were giving him kickbacks under the table. He wasn't just incompetent, he was dangerous, and he was about to take this company public with all these lies buried underneath. I knew then what I had to do. I couldn't just defend myself. I had to take him down completely. But I had to be smart about it. One wrong move, and I'd be the one who looked bitter, vindictive, like a disgruntled employee making accusations she couldn't prove. So I waited. I collected evidence. I documented everything, and I watched Marcus dig his own grave, one lie at a time, while everyone applauded him for it. The hardest part was pretending everything was fine, smiling in meetings while he took credit for my work, nodding along when he'd explain my own strategies back to me like I didn't understand them, watching my team slowly forget that I was the one who'd built the foundation they were standing on. Some nights I'd go home and scream into a pillow just to get the frustration out. Other nights I'd drink too much wine and write emails I'd never send, telling everyone exactly what Marcus was doing. But I never sent them. I stayed controlled, focused, because revenge isn't about emotion, it's about timing. Then, 3 weeks ago, Marcus made his first real mistake. He scheduled a termination meeting without telling Richard. He'd convinced the board that Richard didn't need to be involved in day-to-day personnel decisions anymore. He'd set it up for a Thursday afternoon, late enough that most of the leadership team would be there, but Richard would likely be at a doctor's appointment. He wanted an audience. He wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone, to make it clear that the old guard was out and he was fully in. What he didn't know was that Richard had canceled his appointment that day. What he didn't know was that I had been quietly sending Richard every piece of evidence I'd collected, forwarding it to his personal email with no comment, just the subject line, FYI. What he didn't know was that Richard had been watching, waiting, just like me. And when Marcus called that meeting, when he stood up there with his smirk and his perfect suit and said I was a bottleneck, Richard was standing in the back of the room watching it all unfold. That's where we came in. That's where everything changed. But before I tell you about what happened after Marcus got dragged out of that office, you need to understand something. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about making sure that people who build things don't get erased by people who just know how to talk. And as I stood in that empty conference room, watching the city lights blink outside, I realized something. This was only the beginning.
The morning after Marcus got escorted out, I came into work expecting chaos. What I got was silence. The kind of silence that feels like everyone's holding their breath, waiting to see what happens next. People kept their heads down, typed quietly, spoke in whispers. When I walked past desks, conversations stopped. Eyes followed me, but nobody made contact. It was like I'd become a ghost, or maybe a bomb they were afraid might go off. I got to my office and found flowers on my desk. No card, just a big bouquet of white roses in a glass vase. I stood there staring at them for a long moment, trying to figure out who'd sent them. Then I noticed more. Flowers on the conference table, flowers in the break room. Someone had filled the office with them, and I had a pretty good idea who. I texted Richard. "The flowers are too much." He texted back immediately. "They're not from me, check the cards." I went back to each bouquet and found small cards I'd missed. They were from clients. Long-term clients who'd worked with me from the beginning, people who knew what I'd built. Maria from the bakery had sent the roses on my desk. Her card said, "Thank you for never giving up on the little guys. We never gave up on you either." I had to sit down. My hands were shaking. I'd been so focused on taking down Marcus, on proving my worth to the board and Richard, that I'd forgotten about the people outside the office, the ones who actually mattered. But the flowers weren't the only surprise. At 9 a.m., I got called into an emergency board meeting. My stomach dropped. This was it. They were going to fire me anyway. Marcus might be gone, but I'd embarrassed them, made them look stupid for hiring him in the first place. They were going to clean house, and I'd be part of the cleanup. I walked into the boardroom expecting a funeral. What I got was something completely different. The board members were all there, sitting around the long mahogany table, but they didn't look angry. They looked uncomfortable, embarrassed. Richard sat at the head of the table, and next to him was an empty chair. He gestured to it. "Sit down." I sat. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. One of the board members, a woman named Patricia, who'd always seemed friendly but distant, cleared her throat. "We owe you an apology." Just like that. No build-up, no corporate speak, just a direct statement that hung in the air. I didn't know what to say, so I just waited. Patricia continued. "We made a mistake. Several mistakes, actually. We let ourselves get dazzled by Marcus's resume and his connections. We didn't do our due diligence. We didn't protect the people who had actually built this company. And worst of all, we didn't listen when we should have." Another board member, an older guy named David, spoke up. "Richard shared the documents you compiled. We've spent the last 12 hours going through everything. The falsified reports, the vendor kickbacks, the misrepresented metrics. If we'd gone public with Marcus's numbers, we would have faced lawsuits, maybe criminal charges. You didn't just save your job. You saved this entire company." I felt something crack inside me. All the anger I've been holding on to, all the nights I'd spent awake wondering if I was crazy or paranoid, all the times I doubted myself, it all came rushing to the surface. My voice came out harder than I meant it to. "So why didn't you listen before? Why did it take me getting publicly humiliated for you to pay attention?" The room went quiet. Nobody had an answer. Finally, Richard spoke. "Because we're human, and humans make stupid decisions when they're scared. We were scared of growing too fast, scared of going public with the right leadership.
scared that maybe the people who built this place in a basement weren't polished enough for the big leagues. He looked directly at me. We forgot that polish doesn't mean substance. We forgot who actually made this place work. That's on us. Patricia leaned forward. We'd like to offer you a position on the board, full voting rights, and we'd like you to take over as Chief Operating Officer, officially this time, with full authority and a compensation package that reflects your actual value to this company. I just stared at her. COO, board member, everything Marcus had been angling for, everything he'd tried to take from me, they were handing it to me. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. I need to think about it, I said. Richard nodded. Take all the time you need. But while you're thinking, there's something else you should know. Marcus is threatening to sue. He's claiming wrongful termination, defamation, saying we conspired against him. Of course he was. Men like Marcus never go quietly. They always have to be the victim. The next week was a blur. Marcus hired a lawyer, some shark in a suit who sent us a letter demanding $2 million and a public apology. The letter claimed Marcus had been fired without cause, that the evidence against him was fabricated, that I had manipulated Richard because of a personal grudge. It was garbage, but it was dangerous garbage. If Marcus made enough noise, if he got the press involved, it could damage us right before the IPO. The board wanted to settle, offer him a few $100,000 to go away quietly. I said no. Richard backed me up, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Are you sure? He asked me privately. If this goes to court, it'll get ugly. They'll dig into everything, your emails, your history with the company, every decision you ever made. They'll try to make you look vindictive. I knew he was right, but I also knew that if we paid Marcus off, he'd take that money and go to another company and do the exact same thing to someone else. He'd ruin more lives, take credit for more people's work, leave more destruction in his wake. I couldn't let that happen. Let him sue, I said. We have the truth. Let's see how that holds up in court. So we called his bluff. Our lawyer sent back a response basically saying, bring it on. We included a summary of the evidence we had against Marcus, the falsified reports, the kickbacks, the emails where he'd planned to force me out. We made it clear that if he wanted a fight, we'd give him one, and it wouldn't end well for him. 3 days later, Marcus's lawyer called. They wanted to meet. We met at a neutral location, a conference room in a downtown law office that probably cost $500 an hour to rent. Marcus showed up looking different than I'd ever seen him. The perfect hair was messier. The expensive suit was wrinkled. He had bags under his eyes. For a second, I almost felt bad for him. Almost. His lawyer did most of the talking. My client is willing to drop the lawsuit in exchange for a neutral reference and a non-disclosure agreement. Our lawyer looked at me. I knew what that meant. We'd both agree not to talk about what happened. Marcus would disappear, we'd move on, and nobody would ever know the full story. It was the clean solution, the smart solution. But I thought about the next person Marcus would work with, the next company he'd charm his way into, the next person whose work he'd steal, whose career he'd destroy. I leaned forward and looked directly at Marcus. No, I said. His lawyer blinked. I'm sorry? No non-disclosure agreement. You want to drop the lawsuit? Fine, walk away. But I'm not signing anything that stops me from telling the truth about what happened. Marcus finally spoke, his voice tight. You're making a mistake. You think you've won, but all you've done is make yourself look petty. Everyone's going to see you as the bitter employee who couldn't handle change. I smiled. Not a nice smile. Let them. I'll take bitter truth over polite lies any day. His lawyer tried to negotiate, but I didn't budge. Finally, Marcus stood up. This isn't over, he said. It was almost funny. That's what he'd said when security escorted him out. Like he had some master plan, some ace up his sleeve. But he didn't. He just had ego and empty threats. Yeah, it is, I said, echoing Richard's words from that day in the conference room. And I meant it.
Marcus dropped the lawsuit 2 days later. No settlement, no NDA. He just disappeared. I heard through industry contacts that he'd tried to get positions at other companies, but word had gotten around. People talk in our world, especially about guys like Marcus. His reputation was destroyed, and he'd done it to himself. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd tried to erase me and ended up erasing himself instead. But winning didn't feel the way I thought it would. I kept waiting for this rush of satisfaction, this moment of pure victory where I'd feel vindicated and whole again. It didn't come. Instead, I just felt empty. Like I'd spent so much energy fighting that I'd forgotten what I was fighting for. I started having these moments where I'd be in a meeting, contributing ideas, making decisions, doing the work I'd always done, and I'd suddenly feel disconnected from it all, like I was watching myself from outside my body. One night, about 2 weeks after Marcus dropped the lawsuit, I was working late again. Old habits. I heard a knock on my door and looked up to see Tom, the original third employee, the tech guy from the basement days. We'd drifted apart over the years as the company grew, the way people do. "Hey," he said. "Got a minute?" "Sure." He came in and sat down, looking uncomfortable. "I owe you an apology." I frowned. "For what?" "For not saying anything. When Marcus started taking credit for your work, when he started pushing you out, I saw it happening. We all did. But I didn't speak up. I told myself it wasn't my business, that you could handle yourself. That was cowardly." His honesty caught me off guard. "It's okay," I said automatically. "No, it's not." He leaned forward. "You saved my life, you know. 6 years ago, I was broke, living in my car, about to give up on tech entirely. You're the one who convinced Richard to hire me. You trained me, you believed in me when nobody else did, and when you needed people to have your back, I stayed silent. That's not okay." I didn't know what to say. I'd spent so much time being angry at Marcus, at the board, at the people who laughed, that I hadn't thought much about the people who just stayed quiet. But maybe that was worse in some ways. The ones who knew better but said nothing. Tom wasn't finished. "I'm not the only one who feels this way. Half the original team wants to apologize but doesn't know how. We're ashamed. And we want you to know that if you decide to leave, if you decide this place isn't worth it anymore, we'll understand. But if you stay, things are going to be different. We're going to have your back the way we should have from the start." Something shifted in me then. The emptiness started filling with something else. Not happiness exactly, but purpose. I'd been so focused on the fight that I'd forgotten about the people I was fighting for. The team, the mission, the work that actually mattered. "I'm staying," I said, and I meant it. Tom smiled, relieved. "Good, because this place doesn't work without you. We all know that now." After he left, I sat there for a long time, thinking. The revenge had been satisfying in its own way. Watching Marcus get exposed, seeing justice served, proving that truth matters, all of that mattered. But it wasn't the end of the story. It was just the end of one chapter. The real question was what came next. I thought about Patricia's offer, COO, board member, a title that actually reflected what I'd been doing for years. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, to claim what I'd earned, but another part of me, a quieter part, wondered if titles even mattered. I'd built this company without a fancy title. I'd made it work through action, not recognition. Did I need the board's validation to prove my worth? The answer, I realized, was no. But I wanted it anyway. Not because I needed them to tell me I was valuable, but because I'd earned the right to sit at that table. I'd bled for this company. I'd sacrificed for it. And I wasn't going to let anyone, not Marcus, not the board, not even my own doubts, tell me I didn't belong in that room. The next day, I called Patricia. "I'll take the position, but I have conditions." "Name them." "First, we implement a new policy. Any leadership hire has to be vetted by the existing team, not just the board. No more bringing in people who don't understand our culture. Second, we create a transparent reporting system so nobody can hide problems like Marcus did. And third, we set up a fund to support employees who want to start their own company someday. We got lucky with Richard's vision. I want to pay that forward." There was a pause, then Patricia laughed, a genuine sound.
Done. Anything else? Yeah. No more flowers. They're nice, but they die. I'd rather you just listen when I talk. Deal. And just like that, I became the COO. It should have felt like the end of the story. The hero gets the promotion, the villain is defeated, everyone lives happily ever after. But real life doesn't work that way. Because 3 days after my promotion was announced, I got a call that changed everything again. It was from a journalist, a woman named Sarah Chen, who worked for a major business publication. She said, "I'm writing a story about leadership fraud in tech companies. Marcus Chen's name came up. I heard he was terminated from your company for falsifying reports. I'd like to get your comment." My blood go cold. This was it. The thing I'd been half expecting, half dreading. If this story went public, it would validate everything I'd done. It would expose Marcus completely, but it would also put our company in the spotlight right before the IPO. Investors hate uncertainty. The board would panic. I could hear Richard's voice in my head telling me to be careful, to protect the company first. But I could also hear my own voice, the one that had stayed silent for too long, the one that had watched Marcus steal credit and said nothing. I made a decision. I'll tell you everything. But on the record, I want my name attached, no anonymous sources. If I'm going to tell the story, I'm going to own it. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Are you sure? This could get complicated. I'm sure. We met the next day at a coffee shop, the same one where Richard and I had met 6 years ago. I told her everything. The basement days, building the company from nothing, Marcus's arrival, the systematic erasure, the falsified reports, the planned termination, the confrontation, all of it. Sarah recorded every word, asked smart questions, pushed me on details. When she finished, she turned off her recorder and just looked at me. You know this is going to blow up, right? Once the story runs, everyone is going to have an opinion. Some people will call you a hero, others will call you vindictive. It's going to get messy. I know, but it's the truth, and I'm tired of protecting people who don't deserve it. The story ran a week later, and Sarah was right. It blew up.
The article went live on a Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. I know because I was awake, staring at my phone, refreshing the publication's website every 30 seconds like a crazy person. When it finally appeared, my heart stopped. The headline read, "The woman who built a billion-dollar company and almost got erased from it." Below it was a photo, not of me, but of our office building, tall and gleaming, with Richard's name carved in stone at the entrance. The subheading said, "How one tech executive systematically stole credit, falsified reports, and nearly destroyed the company he was hired to save, and how the woman he tried to fire took him down." I read the entire thing 3 times. Sarah had done her job well. She'd included everything, quotes from me, from Richard, from former employees. She'd gotten documents, screenshots of Marcus's emails, statements from clients who'd worked with me from the beginning. She'd even found 2 other companies where Marcus had pulled similar schemes before, places where he'd taken credit and left destruction in his wake. It was thorough. It was damning. It was the truth. And I felt sick. Not because I regretted it, but because I knew what was coming. I was right. By 8 a.m., my phone was exploding. Texts, calls, emails, LinkedIn messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Some were supportive. "I always knew you were the real force behind that company. So proud of you for speaking up. You're an inspiration." But others were different. "Was this really necessary? Seems like you're just bitter. Airing dirty laundry in public is so unprofessional. You could have handled this privately. Now you just look vindictive." The worst ones came from other women in tech. Messages saying I'd made things harder for all of us, that I'd confirmed every stereotype about women being emotional and holding grudges. That hurt more than I expected. I'd thought they'd understand. Some did, but others saw me as a liability, someone who'd broken the unspoken rule about keeping corporate drama behind closed doors. By noon, the story had been picked up by 6 other major publications, business sites, tech blogs, even mainstream news. Everyone had an angle. Tech's #MeToo moment, when founders lose control,
The dark side of startup culture. My phone rang. It was Patricia. We need to talk. Emergency board meeting in an hour. I knew that tone. I was in trouble. The board meeting was brutal. Not because they yelled. They didn't. They were too corporate for that. But the disappointment was worse than anger. Patricia started. Why didn't you tell us you were talking to a journalist? You didn't ask me not to, I said. David, the older board member, shook his head. That's not how this works. We're about to go public. We have investors, stakeholders, employees whose livelihoods depend on this IPO going smoothly. And now we're in every business publication as the company with a fraud problem. We had a fraud problem. I just made sure everyone knew we dealt with it. By airing our dirty laundry publicly? Patricia's voice was sharp. Do you have any idea how this looks? Investors are already pulling back. We've had 3 calls this morning from people reconsidering their positions. The IPO could be delayed or canceled entirely. That hit me hard. I hadn't thought about that. I'd been so focused on telling the truth, on making sure Marcus didn't get away with it, that I hadn't considered the full consequences. Richard had been quiet the whole time, sitting at the end of the table. Now he spoke. He did what he thought was right. Right, David looked at him. Richard, we respect your history with this company, but this wasn't a personal blog post. This was a calculated interview that's now threatening everything we've built. Everything she built, Richard corrected quietly. The room went silent. Patricia sighed. Look, what's done is done. Now we need damage control. We're releasing a statement this afternoon. We'll emphasize that the issues were identified and resolved internally, that we have strong oversight now, that this was one bad actor who's gone. We need you, she looked at me, to stop talking to press. No more interviews, no comments. Let this blow over. And if it doesn't blow over, then we'll deal with it. But right now, you need to trust us to manage this. I wanted to argue, wanted to say that I'd earned the right to tell my story however I wanted to. But I looked around the table and saw fear, real fear. These people had invested years, money, reputations into this company, and I just put all of it at risk. Okay, I said, quietly. No more interviews. But the story didn't blow over. It got bigger. By the end of the week, I'd been invited to speak at 3 conferences, 2 podcasts, and a morning news show. People were calling me brave, a truth teller, a fighter. Others were calling me reckless, attention-seeking, a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. The weird thing was, I didn't feel like either. I just felt tired. The worst part was watching it affect the people around me. Employees started getting questions from friends and family. Is it true your CEO is a fraud? Is the company going under? Should you be looking for another job? Morale tanked. People were scared, and it was my fault. One afternoon, about a week after the article, I found a note on my desk. Plain paper, printed, no signature. It said, "Thanks for making us all look bad. Some of us actually need this job." I stared at that note for a long time. I thought I was fighting for the team, for the people who'd been ignored and undervalued, but maybe I'd just been fighting for myself. Maybe my revenge had collateral damage I hadn't considered. That night, I couldn't sleep. Again. I kept thinking about that note, about the employees who were scared, about the IPO that might not happen, about whether I'd done the right thing or just the satisfying thing. Around 2 a.m., I got out of bed and wrote an email, not to the press, to the entire company. I didn't ask permission, didn't run it by the board. I just wrote from the heart. Dear team, by now you've all seen the article. You've heard the story. Some of you are angry with me for going public. I understand that. I want to explain why I did it, not to justify it, but to be honest with you. When Marcus tried to fire me, it wasn't just about me. It was about a pattern of people who talk a good game, but don't do the real work, people who take credit and avoid blame, people who value image over substance. I've watched that pattern destroy good people and good companies my entire career, and I was tired of staying silent. But I also know that my choice to speak up has consequences. It's affected our company's reputation. It's made your jobs harder. It's created uncertainty where there should be stability. I'm sorry for that. I'm not sorry for telling the truth, but I am sorry for not thinking through all the ways that truth would impact you. I continued. Here's what I want you to know. This company is strong. Not because of any one person, not because of me or Richard or anyone on the board. It's strong because of the work you do every day, because of the clients you serve, because of the culture we've built together. Marcus couldn't destroy that, and neither can a news article. In the coming weeks, we're going to face questions. Investors might waver. Press might dig for more drama. But if we focus on what we do best, if we keep serving our clients and supporting each other, we'll get through this, and we'll be stronger for it. I built this company because I believed in something bigger than myself. I still do. That belief is why I fought back, and it's why I'm staying, if you'll have me. I understand if some of you have lost trust in me. I get it. But I promise you this. I will work every day to earn it back, not with words, but with action. Thank you for reading this. Thank you for the work you do. And thank you for giving a broke 28-year-old a chance 6 years ago. I won't forget that, ever. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I closed my laptop and finally fell asleep. The next morning, my inbox was full. Over 60 responses from employees. Some were short. Thanks for the honesty. We've got you back. Others were longer, sharing their own stories of being overlooked or underestimated. A few were critical, but respectful. I wish you'd thought this through more, but I appreciate you owning the consequences. One email stood out. It was from Jenny, a young developer I'd hired 8 months ago. She wrote, "I almost quit last week, not because of the article, but because I was afraid this place was just like everywhere else, talking about values, but not living them. Your email reminded me why I joined. Thank you for fighting. Please don't stop." That email made me cry. Actual tears, sitting at my kitchen table at 7 in the morning. Because I realized something. The fight wasn't over. Taking down Marcus was just one battle. The real war was building something better, creating a place where people like Jenny didn't have to be afraid, where hard work mattered more than smooth talk, where the truth was valued over comfort. I went into the office that day with a new sense of purpose. The board might be mad at me, the press might tear me apart, but I had work to do, real work. Over the next month, things slowly stabilized. The initial media frenzy died down. We implemented new policies, new oversight, new transparency measures. I personally met with every department, listened to concerns, answered questions. It was exhausting, but it was also healing. The IPO got delayed, but not canceled. Investors wanted to see how we handled the crisis, so we showed them. We opened up our books completely, showed them the old falsified reports next to the real numbers, proved that we were actually stronger than Marcus had made us look. We brought in independent auditors. We created an ethics board. We didn't just talk about change, we built it. And slowly, investors started coming back. Not all of them. Some were gone for good. But others, the ones who cared about more than just a quick profit, they stayed. They believed in what we were building.
Then, 2 months after the article, something unexpected happened. I got an email from Marcus. The subject line just said, "Conversation?" I stared at it for 10 minutes before opening it. Part of me wanted to delete it immediately, but curiosity won. The email was short. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I'd like to talk, just once. If you're willing. No lawyers, no agenda, just two people who destroyed each other's lives trying to understand why. I'll be at Cafe Moreno tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'll understand if you don't show." Cafe Moreno was the place where Richard and I had first met. The irony wasn't lost on me. I should have ignored it, should have deleted the email and moved on. But something made me respond. One word. Okay. The next day, I showed up at the cafe at exactly 2 p.m. Marcus was already there, sitting in a corner booth, looking nothing like the polished executive I'd known. He'd lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes. His hair was longer, messy. He looked human. I sat down across from him. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. Finally, he said, "Thank you for coming." I didn't respond. He continued, "I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of therapy actually, and I wanted to say something I should have said months ago.
"I'm sorry. I wasn't expecting that. I'd expected excuses, justifications, maybe even attacks, but not an apology." "For what specifically?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "For all of it. For taking credit for your work, for trying to erase you, for being so desperate to prove myself that I didn't care who I hurt." He looked down at his coffee. "I told myself I was just doing what successful people do, being strategic, playing the game. But the truth is, I was terrified." "Of what?" "Of being exposed as a fraud. I've spent my whole career pretending to be smarter than I am. Every job, I'd come in, talk a good game, take credit for other people's work, then leave before anyone figured out I didn't actually know what I was doing. I thought I could do the same with your company. But you were different. You actually built things. You actually knew what you were talking about. And that terrified me, because I knew eventually everyone would see the difference between us." His honesty caught me off guard. I'd spent so long thinking of him as a villain, a calculating monster. But sitting there, I saw something else, a deeply insecure person who'd built a career on lies and finally got caught. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you deserve to know, and because I'm trying to be honest for the first time in my life. I'm not working anywhere right now. Nobody will hire me. I burned through my savings on legal fees. My marriage fell apart. I'm living with my brother and trying to figure out who I am without the suits and the titles and the performance." He looked up at me. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that you were right about all of it, and I'm sorry." I sat there, processing. Part of me wanted to tear into him, to list every way he'd hurt me and others, but another part just felt sad. Not for him exactly, but for the waste of it all. The energy spent fighting, the damage done, the time we'd never get back. "I don't forgive you," I said. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I appreciate you saying this." He nodded. "That's fair. Can I ask you something? Why did you email me? What do you want from this?" "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe closure. Maybe just to see if I could face you without hiding behind lawyers and PR statements. Maybe to remind myself what real accountability looks like." We talked for another hour, not as enemies, but as two people trying to make sense of a situation that had spiraled beyond either of our control. He told me about the other companies, the other people he'd hurt. I told him about the sleepless nights, the doubt, the cost of fighting back. When we finally stood to leave, he extended his hand. "For what it's worth, you built something incredible. I hope you know that." I shook his hand. I do now. I walked out of that cafe feeling lighter than I had in months, not because I'd forgiven Marcus, but because I'd seen him as human, and somehow that made the whole experience less heavy. He wasn't a monster. He was just a broken person who'd made terrible choices. That didn't excuse what he'd done, but it did help me let go of some of the anger I'd been carrying. 3 weeks later, we had our IPO. It was smaller than originally planned. We raised less money than the initial projections, but we went public on our own terms, with honest numbers and a team that believed in what we were building. I stood on the floor of the stock exchange with Richard next to me, watching our company's name light up on the screens. He looked over at me and smiled. "We did it." "Yeah," I said, "we did." But I wasn't thinking about the money or the validation or the success. I was thinking about Maria from the bakery and the thousands of small business owners like her that we'd helped over the years. I was thinking about Jenny and the other young employees who now had a place that valued real work over performance. I was thinking about the fact that truth had won, even when it was messy and painful and expensive. The stock performed well, not spectacularly, but steady, strong, just like the company itself. Over the next year, things normalized. We hired new people, good people, with thorough vetting processes. We promoted from within. We built systems that made it harder for another Marcus to happen. And slowly, the story of the article and the drama faded into company history. Just another chapter in a longer story. I stayed on as COO, joined the board, worked harder than ever, but differently this time. Not out of fear or insecurity, but out of genuine purpose. I mentored young employees, shared my story at conferences, not for revenge, but to help others recognize the warning signs of toxic leadership. I became the person I'd needed when I was younger. One day, about 18 months after everything went down, I got a package at the office. No return address. Inside was a book, a business book about ethical leadership. And tucked inside was a note on plain paper. Thank you for teaching me what real strength looks like. I'm trying to do better. M. I never responded, didn't need to, but I kept the note. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that people can change, that accountability matters, that truth, even painful truth, is worth fighting for. Richard passed away 6 months after the IPO. His health was declining, and he wanted to spend his remaining time with family. At his farewell party, he pulled me aside. He said, "I have something to tell you. That day Marcus tried to fire you, I almost wasn't there. I almost stayed home. But something told me to come in. Call it instinct, call it luck, call it whatever you want. But I'm glad I listened." Me too. You know what the real victory is? Not that Marcus lost, not even that you won. It's that this place will outlive both of you. It'll keep helping people long after we're all gone. That's what matters. He was right. The revenge, the justice, the vindication, all of that mattered in the moment. But the real victory was building something that lasted, something that meant something. Richard passed away 8 months later. We held a memorial at the office. Hundreds of people showed up. Employees, clients, competitors, people whose lives he'd touched. Person after person stood up and told stories. But the story that stuck with me came from Tom, the original third employee. Tom taught me something important. He taught me that the best revenge against a world that underestimates you isn't proving them wrong once. It's building something so good, so solid, so real, that it keeps proving them wrong long after you're gone. That's what he did. That's what she did. He nodded towards me. And that's what we're going to keep doing. The room erupted in applause. And standing there, looking out at all these people who'd come together around a shared mission, I finally felt it. Not revenge, not vindication, just peace. Because this story was never really about Marcus. It was about refusing to be erased. It was about standing up when it would have been easier to sit down. It was about choosing truth over comfort, action over acceptance, building over bitterness. Did I handle everything perfectly? No. I made mistakes. I hurt people without meaning to. I let anger drive me when wisdom should have. But I also did something important. I fought back. Not with lies or manipulation or cruelty, with truth, with evidence, with the simple, radical act of refusing to disappear. And in the end, that's what mattered. Not that I destroyed Marcus, but that I refused to let him destroy me. Not that I got revenge, but that I got free. Today, 5 years after everything happened, the company is thriving. We're profitable, growing, making a real difference in people's lives. I'm still COO, still building, still fighting the good fight.
I think about Marcus sometimes. Wonder where he is, what he's doing, if he ever really changed. I hope he did. Not for my sake, but for his. Because living a lie is exhausting. Trust me, I know what it's like to fight one. People ask me sometimes if I regret going public with the story, if I'd do it differently knowing what I know now. The answer is complicated. I regret the pain it caused people I care about. I regret not thinking through all the consequences. But I don't regret telling the truth.
Because silence protects the wrong people, and I was done protecting people who didn't deserve it. This story doesn't have a perfect ending. Real life never does, but it has a true one. And sometimes, that's better. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever felt underestimated or erased or pushed aside, leave a comment. Share your story. Hit subscribe if you want to hear more stories about people who refuse to stay quiet. And remember, revenge isn't about destruction. It's about restoration. It's about taking back what's yours and building something that can't be taken away. Thanks for listening to this journey. It was a long one, but then again, the truth usually is. See you in the next one.